Evening. So, how do we create a just society? Let's say that we already have the manual, we already have the Torah, whatever this manual means for you. How do we do it? My name is Rabbi Sivan Maas, and I serve as the Dean of the Tmura-IISHJ, Tmura Judaism. Tonight, we are fortunate to have with us Rabbi Shlomit who will introduce herself in a minute. Just to tell you about what we wanted to do. We are in a troubling time here in Israel, already really in the Middle East. We'll refer to that a bit in our discussion at the end after our study session. And as I mentioned to Rabbi Shalom when we were preparing this, if you would like, we could meet together to discuss some more about what we refer to as the situation here in Israel. So just before we embark on our study, focusing on the harvest and the bread and the holiday of Shavuot, Shlomit, how about you introducing yourself?
Hi, good evening. Chag Sameach. I'm Rabbi Shlomit Myers. I live in Kibbutz Endor, which is in the Lower Galilee with these beautiful surroundings. You can see Mount Tabor and the wheat fields that we'll talk about them later. I work with Sivan in Tmura, and also I lead a congregation, a secular congregation on the kibbutz in Endor.
Thank you, Shlomit, and it really is a pleasure to work together and teach together. So Pentecost is an agricultural holiday that marks the wheat harvest here in Israel. Agriculture, as you know, is a complex matter. It is physically difficult, it is risky, but it also full of creative joy and hope. Lords and kings ruled using it, their peasants and slaves, but also developed a system of reward and charity, as is also described in the book of Ruth in the Bible. The attribution of receiving the 10 Commandments or the Torah on the same month, on the month of Sivan, is probably a much later thing that happened in history. For me, this is the holiday of the Jewish compass and conscience. I would say not just personal, but social justice. We are secular. We see ourselves as Jews who carry with us the humanistic compass that was passed to us by previous generations. This conscience carried by our mothers and fathers, maybe from biblical times, to the founding of our states, both in North America and in Israel. In the Zionist Independence Declaration, you could actually read and see it embedded in the text, in the vision. But reality is a different story. It requires correction, amendment, or as we say, tikkun in Hebrew. Later in history, the Shavuot correction or amendment or repair customs was added to this holiday, inviting this kind of study option, which recalibrates our compasses for personal and social correction. We, in return, combine these past traditions. On the one hand, this week, we should have been out in the fields to harvest wheat and bake bread in Endor, and Shlomit will tell you about that a little later. But today and in the past week, we have been studying about the values and history of this holiday, like we're doing together with our extended family tonight in North America. So Shlomit, why don't I start talking about actually the bread itself before I will give you the opportunity to tell us about real bread, not just thoughts about bread. Some say that bread contains various hidden meanings. But what we do know for sure is that bread represents the dawn of civilization. Learning to domesticate grain, fashioning pots and ovens. Breads possess symbolic significance in the folklore, religion, culture, and politics in all ethnic cultures in the world, in the Western world, I should say, but also in Israel. It has a significant role in life cycle events, rituals, and ceremonies. Sometimes it actually becomes sacred, others merely traditional, or just tasty and beautiful. In ancient cultures, a parallel was drawn between the human life cycle and the process of fertilization, growth, ripening, and withering back into nature. Some may say, as the curator of the bread exhibition at the Israeli Museum a few years back, Dr. Noam Ben Yosef, that a similar development also characterized the production of bread from its kneading, baking in the oven, and its disappearance when we actually eat it. Yet, one piece of dough can serve to ferment the next cycle of bread making. It is therefore no wonder that leavened or fermented dough is widely used in customs related to marriage, pregnancy, and fertility. Bread may also serve as an amulet or a lucky charm, as an expression of the individual's attachment to his or her family and community, as a means of providing comfort and healing. And some say, even as a mediator between our world and the afterworld. What is the connection between bread and the Torah? Was the manna given in Sinai a kind of bread? The matzot we eat in Pesach are a reminder of how we became a people. And believe it or not, the Torah actually gets eaten in the Bible. For example, in the book of Ezekiel, it says, "Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with roll that I give thee. Then did I eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness." This idea that the Torah is sweet also became part of ceremonies, both in the Mizrach, in the East Judaism, and in West Judaism. When a boy at the age of 3 started to study, he was, as it is said in this song written by Yoshua Sobol about this community in Morocco, all the letters were made of honey. And they would tell him, "Lick it, my friend." And the Torah in his mouth feels sweet as honey. So this idea that the Torah tastes like anything, that it is good, therefore it tastes sweet, was then connected to various ceremonies through honey and bread. Here, for example,
Show
bread.
us the pictures, Sivan. You have to show us the pictures.
Thank you for telling me that I did not share the screen
So
yet.
we didn't saw the words, but now we'll see the pictures.
Thank you. So, as you can see, bread is alive and well in life cycle events. This is an event called Bechina, which is like a promo for a wedding, when the women gather together around the kind of chalot and sweetness that they make together, resembling their sweet future, but also connecting to the Torah. Here in the same Jerusalem, you see two different kinds of weddings. One, a Jewish ultra-Orthodox wedding on the right-hand side with a bagel challah, and on the left-hand side, you see an Ethiopian Orthodox Christian community celebrating this life cycle event. both having this connection of virginity and fertility with a kind of bread with a hole in the middle. Jumping a few years more, when they have children and they had a daughter, let's say, and she had a bat mitzvah, if she's Jewish, she eats a challah once more, and this is called a chalat bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, sometimes actually made to look like the Torah. And certainly in Christian ceremonies, in confirmation and in many other sacraments, where the bread is actually sacred. Here is an example of a festival, and if we would have time, we would have gone through all the Jewish festivals and see that every single festival has a different kind of bread, and Shlomit will refer to that a bit later. Here are two breads in Purim, one an Ashkenazi bread and one a Moroccan bread. Going back to a life cycle, here are three ceremonies. On the left-hand side is the Jewish ceremony of Pidyon Haben, or the redemption of the firstborn. In the middle is an Orthodox Ethiopian Christian ceremony, which right after the baptism, the boy is covered with a big, I would say, dough. And on the right-hand side, a baptism in an Armenian church. Sometimes the significance, the meaning behind it is shared but different. This idea of bread as a symbol of salvation is certainly a different kind of salvation in Judaism as in Christianity. But during this time of Passover, different breads are being baked, from the matzot to the Easter breads to the challah, key bread, which is made at the end of the week of matzot eating of Passover. So as we mentioned, bread is all around us. And I would like Shlomit, please, if you can tell us a little bit about what does bread mean to you, both personally and as a rabbi.
Okay, I started baking bread long time ago. I think when I was in my 20s. My sister-in-law got a book about bread from America, actually, and I started baking bread. And I realized that by baking bread, not only I have better bread, which tastes great, I learned how to make challah and make Shabbat very special for me, for my family, and for my congregation. I want to show you some examples and the story of my challah making. As I said, I make bread. This is sourdough bread. It's great bread. It's healthy. It's beautiful. And it's very relaxing. Last night, when I was hearing the news, this is what I did. I recommend it. And every week, when we get to the Shabbat, you know, we ran all week. We were very busy. When I make the challah, and I teach others to do the challah, it's actually the way to say, this is the end of the week. This is time for Shabbat. This is time for good. This is time for us. And not only saying it by, excuse me, but making it, bringing this challah, beautiful challah into the house, it actually very, very relaxing and makes the difference that we need between everyday life and the Shabbat. I keep saying that it's like Jewish meditation. It's like taking a deep breath before you go into Shabbat. And I think you can even smell from the picture. And the great thing is, it's not only Shabbat. We have all the other holidays. And I make chalot for many other holidays. I make for Rosh Hashanah with honey and pomegranates. And for Sukkot, it's a whole basket of pomegranates, the same dough. And for Hanukkah, this menorah bread, Chanukiah. And when spring comes along and my garden is full of herbs and flowers, I put them in the bread, and everybody loves it, not only from the garden, but also on Friday night. And recently, I went to visit a friend in Nazareth. She's an Arab, she's an amazing cook, and she makes the Arab bread where they use this wooden things. I forgot the name. And I use this for the challah. So this is, as we said, an Arab Jewish challah. And many years ago, I mean, I grew up in this area. I was always surrounded by wheat fields, and the seasons changed the colors. And I always knew, because my father wasn't a farmer, but other people were farmers and all around us, and we knew how much work you have to put into making bread. And we know already from the Talmud that it was said, and you can read it here, I won't read the whole thing, but all the many, many things that the first man, Adam, had to do. And until today, we have to do all these things, to plow and sow and reap, and the whole thing. And we just go to the supermarket and have everything ready, prepared for us. So knowing that there's a lot of effort and a lot of luck also, and a good year in order to make bread, it's an important thing to know. And as I said, it surrounds our life. And on the kibbutz, we have an archaeological museum that brings to life all the old works and the deeds that were done in order to make bread. And we were actually supposed last Friday to go together, the students of Tmura, and celebrate the holiday by going out to the field and cutting the wheat and bringing it back to the yard and throwing it in the wind and separating the straw from the seeds, and then grinding them into bread. And the situation changed everything. We didn't do that. We were hoping that we'll celebrate like this, like the old times in the kibbutz. And the reality is a bit different. And this brings us to today, right, Sivan?
Yes, and hopefully this is a probably good opportunity to maybe invite you all next year to celebrate with us Shavuot in the fields of Indor. I think that could be a lot of fun. We are in troubling times. There is a conflict both inside Israel, between Arabs and Jews, between Jews and Jews, between Arabs and Arabs. It is a bad time. It is frustrating because on the one hand, you have this notion that time allows you to accumulate good, and the end is that it will be actually good, but it doesn't work like that. It is not linear. But we do realize that in order for it to become better, we have to change the reality. We have the vision, as I mentioned when we started the study session. We have our compasses, and we have many people out there. Many of them are secular humanistic rabbis who meet with the Arabs on very often in very many initiatives to make our life better. So it's frustrating, on the other hand, that it's not better yet, but I think we are full of hope, and we know deep inside that we can change it. We can change reality. So if you would like to talk more about the situation, and for Shlomit and I to describe more of what it is like for me here in Jerusalem, for my family in Tel Aviv, for Shlomit's family in Tel Aviv, and in Indor, we would be happy to meet with you next week. But before we go, we are rabbis. We have to finish with some hope and blessing for Chag Sameach. So I'm bringing it back to you. Shlomit, what will we say about our bread?
Yeah, a minute before we go to the good, to the bread, I just want to show, this is the picture of these days in the fields. I mean, we are in a conflict and it's scary. We usually live together. We're good neighbors. We're friends, but not always. There's a conflict and we have to solve it together. And what we're gonna do this holiday is, again, bake our bread and sit together like we do on Fridays and say the blessing that we say, a good secular one. We bless and thank for the wheat that grew, for the men and women who sowed and raised and harvested and ground and kneaded and braided and waited patiently for the baked bread. We thank and rejoice the people with whom we share this challah and the Shabbat, when it's Shabbat, and this Chag Shavuot. So Chag Sameach to all of you. Thank you for having us. And may we have a real tikkun next year. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, peace